I know a lot of you are familiar with us as a company, but for those of you who aren't, we are an Autodesk Platinum partner, and that's actually a new development for us this year. We're very excited about it. One of the only Platinum partners on the East Coast and one of few in the country. And what that means, it's essentially just a higher tier showing that we have a certain level of support, certain level of services to help our customers out. We've actually been in business for over 25, I guess actually this year would be 26 years, and we are focused on the AEC industry, though we do work with numerous other customers. Our focus is kind of on the AEC industry for architecture, engineering, and construction. We do have two offices in this country. We have New York and Philadelphia. New York is our main office, and we do have sales and training in Philadelphia as well. And move on to the next slide, Steve. Just to give you a little bit about what we do besides the sales aspect, we obviously do sell the software, but we also try to help out our customers on the training side. CAD and BIM training to become proficient in the software that you're actually being sold. And we do provide training to help your staff become more proficient in the software, any of the applications that we sell. And we do have authorized training centers in New York and Philadelphia. We have architects and engineers on staff. As I mentioned, I was an architect. A lot of our IT guys are actually architects and engineers originally as well. And these courses are registered through AIA and do have AIA and PDH learning units for architects and engineers. Just to give you a little bit of, to kind of help out as well, on top of that, if your firm has not yet gotten started with BIM, we can help you to develop a strategy and schedule to prepare for the first project, from obtaining the software to training and then moving on to actually implementation. So our guys can actually be there for you as over-the-shoulder support or coming in to help set up standards, model management services, family creation, anything like that. We can be there to help you out as well. And on top of Autodesk software, we actually work with a number of other technology partners, which we've listed here. McNeil products, Rhino, Flamingo, things like that. Bluebeam, which is a great PDF software for architects and engineers. V-Ray, which is a rendering plugin, and a number of other software partners that you can see here. So if you did have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to us, and we can go into a bit more detail there. And lastly, we also work with 3D systems. This is something that has been a big push for us lately. We've felt that the industry is really moving towards 3D printing. So we actually have in-house a 3D printer, and we can do 3D printing for our customers in-house. We also sell the 3D printers. So this is something that we can discuss with you as well. We've been working with 3D systems for a number of years now, and we'd be happy to show you some of the amazing things you can achieve through this new technology. It really helps to kind of push these designs for our customers. So just as a reminder, these slides will actually be sent to everybody through an email next week. And if you do have any questions about the BIM software, please feel free to contact us at the email that you see there, and we'll put you in touch with the correct sales manager there. But today's webinar is actually going to give you one learning unit for AIA and PDH. And that certificate of completion will be emailed to you as well. If you want to contact our marketing people here at Microsol Resources, just use that email that you see there, marketing@microsolresources.com. And feel free to join us on upcoming webcasts. Those are listed on our website, as you can see here, and I believe they'll actually be directed to that site at the end of the webinar. You can follow along with this and see anything that we have coming up in the near future. There are a couple in February if you want to click on those to learn a little bit more. And I will say that throughout the webcast, we're probably going to have some questions. If people would like to keep an eye on the chat box, please put your questions in the chat box. It makes it a little bit easier on us to keep up with. We'll try to keep an eye on it as much as possible. We will try to hold most of them to the end because I think we will have a question and answer session. But if anything does pop up, we'll try to bring it to Steve's attention and try to address that as needed. But at that point, I think, Steve, I will pass it on to you.
Great, thanks, and good morning, everyone. I'm dialing in remotely today from Phoenix because I got snowed out of returning back to the East Coast. So the telephone connection isn't the best, but hopefully you'll bear with me and be able to hear. So as you heard, my background was 20 years in architecture. and now I've been in the technology and information space here for the last 14 years. And this is my email down here. I welcome you to contact me at any time and talk about any of these issues, because I'm passionately interested in the advancement of our industry. So at McGraw Hill, the construction business unit is part of 6 business units of McGraw Hill Financial overall. And hopefully you are familiar with a lot of our brands, Engineering News Record, Dodge, Suites, and Architectural Record. And part of what I am closely involved with is the research. And if you'll go to this website, theanalyticstore.com, you'll see there's probably about 60 of these now, smart market reports that we've been doing for almost 10 years on various topics. I've been involved in a lot of these that you see here around technology types of topics. And so what we're going to do today is I'll give you some highlights of 4 of the most recent ones that are all around technology in one way or another. And then I'll share with you a couple of what we're seeing as the most interesting emerging trends to keep an eye on, and some of the research that we currently have underway. And again, these reports are free. They're sponsored by industry companies and organizations, and so they're all at this analyticstore.construction.com. Help yourself to them. So firstly, let me show you the most recent one. It's only been out a matter of weeks now, and it's looking at how construction companies specifically are using BIM and in 10 major global markets. And so we're looking at their level of engagement with BIM, how much of their portfolio they're doing, what their skill level is, what their experience track record is. We're looking at their business benefits, because that's really our angle in studying BIM around the world, is what's the business benefit and what's the return on investment, and also where people are going to be making investments. And also we look into the frequency and the value of various business BIM activities, either pre-construction, construction, or post-construction. And we have some country profiles for each of the 10 countries. And then there's a series of case studies, interviews, and feature articles on important trends, as there are in all these smart market reports. So I can't really present them in depth, but I'll give you sort of a drive-by view, and you can download it on your own and look more deeply at the information. So we focused on 3 regions in the Americas, a number of them in Australia and Asia. We didn't do surveys in China, Hong Kong, Malaysia, or India, but we do have interview-based information about those, and then in Western Europe. And we worked with this series of organizations that you see down here to reach out to their members. So overall, we've been tracking the business benefits and the ROI of BIM since 2007, and contractors have now actually exceeded architects in adoption in North America, and have always exceeded design professionals in terms of their ROI. At this point, we're finding that 3/4 of the contractors globally are reporting they're getting a positive ROI. And in some cases, they're at 97% of the users are reporting a positive ROI. And this compares to that last study that we did in North America, where only 37% of the engineers and only 2/3 of the architects could say that they were getting a positive ROI. So the trend is really shifting towards contractors now in a leadership position in BIM pretty much all over the world. The overall implementation of contractors is going to increase by 50% in the next 2 years. And you're seeing incredible planned growth over the next couple of years in places like Brazil, where they're going to triple the amount of people who are implementing at a high level. And Australia, New Zealand, Korea, and the UK, with their government mandate now, is going to double the number of contractors working at a very high level of implementation. And then you'll see what some of the investments that people are making, and those who are most committed. And actually, the Koreans and the Japanese seem to be most committed in terms of making investments. So just some of the highlights of the information you'll see when you go through the report. You'll see what sorts of projects people are using BIM on, both building types and non-building types. And you'll see that broken out by country and with a little bit more specificity in terms of the types. You'll see how long contractors have been using BIM in various regions and their level of expertise. And we take this expertise and we take this experience, and we also ask GCs to tell us what they think about the state of trade contractors in their by skill in their various countries. And you'll see the steel guys and the MEP guys are pretty much the leaders, with drywall, concrete, masonry, and civil sort of catching up down here in the lower right. We also look at implementation, which is, all right, you're using BIM, you've adopted it, but what percentage of your portfolio involves BIM now? And so we have 4 categories. That low is really, they're kind of in the shallow end of the pool, only 15% of the projects, all the way up to a very high level where more than 60% of your projects involve BIM. And so these 2 graphs you see here, on the left is currently, and on the right is a projection for 2 years from now. And this is where we see this 50% growth in the amount of BIM that contractors say they'll be doing 2 years from now. So this is growing incredibly rapidly all over the world. You'll see a breakdown by country, and you see places like Brazil here is going to triple the number of people operating at that high or very high implementation level. And so we take those 3 things, the experience, the skill, and the implementation, and we developed a weighted scoring apparatus for that, which we call the BIM engagement level. And we assign an index to every single one of the respondents, and then we break that down across all the regions. And overall, there's 11% that we would consider to be at this very high engagement level. They've got a high skill level, high experience level, and they're implementing at that highest level of implementation. So we expect that's going to grow interestingly over time as we continue to track this. So right now, we just have 11% of the BIM user contractors around the world that we would consider to be in that top group. And you'll see how that breaks out by country. The U.S. probably has the highest number at that very high level, but Canada also, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, the U.K. all have folks operating at that very high level. And you'll see a place like Brazil still has over half their users are at that low engagement level, but as we all saw earlier, they're planning to triple their high engagement folks very soon. So that's a really fast-growing BIM market down there. And the U.K. as well because of the government mandate there. And we break it out by the size of companies. So you can see with folks at the very high BIM engagement level, it's mostly the bigger companies, versus at the low engagement level, it's mostly these smaller companies. So as I said before, we've spent a lot of time tracking benefits, and we've been doing this now for 7 years. And you can see here across all those countries what people are citing from the contractor's viewpoint as being the top benefits of BIM for their company. And I've put this little star by the ones that we consider to be internal benefits. They're things that actually impact you as a business versus they make the project better or they make the project process better. And so you can see where they fall, because those, at the end of the day, are the ones that really drive any kind of technology adoption. It has to actually be really good for the business that's using it. In terms of ROI, we've also been tracking that since 2007. And you can see across all those countries, it's kind of a bell curve with this, what we call moderately positive ROI being the majority. But then when you take that and you begin to slice it by the BIM engagement, and you see where those very high BIM engagement folks are, you see half of those have what we call a very positive ROI, over 25%, versus those who are at that low BIM engagement. You still have a third of those that are either negative or break even. And this is a sort of a natural flow, but it's interesting as people do improve and commit to further investment, further skill level, and further implementation, the ROI definitely improves. And then we'll show it to you also. You'll see it in there by country. And we do a 2-page spread on every single country that we did also, so you can just look at those countries individually in the report. And then we also look at the investments, of course, because we like to follow the money. And where across all the countries, you can see the green line here is where that very high BIM engagement level is investing. And as you can see, they're all investing much more seriously, more heavily committed to making investments than the average. But you can see, interestingly, where the money is going to be spent. One of those areas, of course, is this tablets and mobile devices. And that leads us to our quick look here at the second report, which we did on information mobility. And again, this is one of those that's free at the analytics store. The purpose here was to baseline where we are in terms of information mobility and assess any gaps that need to be addressed by the industry in order to make this more powerful. We focused again here just on trade contractors and general contractors. And in terms of the benefits, you can see collaboration, better productivity, less reliance on prints and paper, and reduced risk. You'll see study part about the impact of the productivity of the flow of project information. The larger the firm, the greater productivity impact that they found. And then there's a fair amount talking about this progression that we're making from basically 20th century types of technology and communications technology and authoring of information and sharing of information into where we're now going in the 21st century and where the generals are and where the trades are. And in terms of BIM, this kind of information that we've been tracking here in the United States since 2007 in terms of BIM adoption hasn't really caught up quite so much when you look at what people are now doing mobile. And so that has to move out of the office and off the desktop and out into the mobile area. So this is one of those gaps that we identified that really still needs work. And also in terms of the documentation, mobile technology is going to lead us into probably new types of access and new types of documents. But mostly people are still working with sort of old school documents in this new school kind of communications tool. So we see that's another area that's going to grow is, and now that you have these mobile devices, what sort of document formats can you be bringing to people? And we track that in terms of not only the types of documents, but cloud storage services. So as you'll see here, the gray line is now, and this red line is where people think they'll be doing in 2 years. So everybody sees that they'll be doing far less in the way of these traditional documents being the main kind of point-to-point exchange. And everybody's seeing that there's going to be a whole lot more putting information up into the cloud and having people get it from there. So this is very clearly a trend that we're going to see in construction. And in terms of lean design and construction, the third report I'll share a little bit with you today. And again, this is free and you can download it from the site. We looked at the benefits that are achieved by those folks who are implementing lean, and it's really astounding. What you'll see here is people at this high level of achievement and a medium level of achievement. So they're still seriously getting, this is the percentage of those players that are actually getting these kinds of benefits. And we go into a fair amount of detail about project profitability, impact on profit margins, and these green areas are where people agree that they're actually getting lift in those areas from having moved into lean practices. And specifically the impact on profit because of schedule increases, schedule improvements, impact on being more successful in bidding, impact on competitiveness. I mean, these benefits are really compelling. But unfortunately, when you look at the entire industry here and you ask them, are you familiar with it? Are you not familiar with it? Have you implemented it? It really isn't being taken up very aggressively. A little bit better in the West than in other parts of the country, but still, it's very much emerging, even though the benefits are very tangible and very powerful. And this is the graph that really struck me the most. I mean, in spite of this graph here on the upper right that all of us have seen a million times about the productivity of the rest of industry versus the lagging productivity of construction, in spite of that, when we asked the full industry here, do you believe that our industry today is inefficient or highly inefficient? You're seeing those who have actually implemented lean practices, they get that. They understand that our industry is really inefficient and needs a lot of work. Whereas you go down here and you say, these are the folks who said that, no, it's fine. We have a highly efficient or an efficient industry. There are no problems here. And you can see almost most of those are the folks who actually aren't even familiar, never even heard of lean. And so I look at that as you've got almost half the industry out there in super denial about the facts of our industry. And so we're really trying to push much better awareness about lean practices and the benefits of them. And so, as you would not be surprised to see, we put a fair amount of time in this report into looking at why it is that lean hasn't taken over as much as it should have, and it's really about a lack of knowledge, support across the team. It's too complex, employee resistance, lack of understanding. So really an awful lot of this is educational, and that's part of why we do these reports, and we make them free, is to try and get the information out. And then lastly, I'll show you a report that we did about the growth of green design and green building trends all over the world. We did this in 62 markets. We had almost 1,000 respondents across all the various types of players. We did specifically deep dives in Germany, Norway, the UK, Singapore, Australia, the UAE, South Africa, United States, and Brazil. But we do have data from all these other markets in this report. This is really amazing stuff. And we'll go, in the report you'll see we go through each of these regions, in this case showing you what was going on in 2012 and what their projection was for the amount of green work, those who are going to be doing more than 60% green 3 years out. And you can see with places like Singapore, where they've made it a government mandate and they tightly control it, you're seeing outstanding results. But then even places like South Africa, which are much more self-generated, you know, they're planning great growth, as is Brazil. And that activity is increasing everywhere. You know, this shows you about 2009, 2012, 2015, how many folks were doing it, either just still exploring it in the orange, or in the blue was, you know, very light involvement, maybe as much as 15% of their projects were green, versus where they're going to have as much as 60% by 2015. So the growth is really powerful all over the world. We also track the most important reasons, the social reasons, the environmental reasons. We look at what sectors are planning the green building activity over the next 3 years. You'll see a lot of deep dive into the various benefits that people are getting. You'll also see the difference between applying it to a new construction versus applying it to a renovation. And actually the median payback on renovation projects is a little bit better than on new green building. And then the same thing in terms of the business value. From an owner's viewpoint, is building green or renovating green going to increase my asset value? And this is something that we've been tracking now for 3 or 4 years, because this is one of those things that we look at as probably the biggest driver, is owners realizing that their asset value will increase. That's going to drive them to implement much more green practices on their new and their renovations. And so since 2005, we've been tracking projects in Dodge. When they come into our Dodge database, we have about 600,000 projects in North America at any one time that are currently in the design phase. And one of the questions we ask is, are you going for a LEED certification? And that, as you can see, has just really skyrocketed over the time we've been tracking that. So if you look at where we believe the non-residential starts are going to be, and this is a quick peek at our economic forecast, where we believe we're going to be seeing extremely good growth over the next couple of years, what the percentage of that is green is really exciting. And this is all non-residential. We also, you'll see in the report, the impact on revenues through this global financial crisis that we've just been through. Those green projects versus the rest of the industry has actually carried people across the global financial crisis. And again, looking at what those drivers are, you know, not only do owners have to understand it, but then you can also do an awful lot with policy. And so this growth of the energy disclosure reporting policy, where it's under consideration, and there's existing residential as well, you know, this trend will also really help to drive green. So that was a look at those 4 reports. I encourage you to go to analyticsstore.construction.com, download any of those, and see the other 30 or 40 that are up there on various topics. Well, let me share with you now some of our thoughts in terms of things that we're seeing that we believe are going to be interesting trends that will be affecting everybody. And I'm just going to touch on a couple today. The first one's about visualization. You know, obviously, with BIM, we've been able to do incredible amounts of very powerful visualization, but it has largely been, you know, on a computer screen in an office somewhere. And you know, not to downplay that, because 20 years in architecture, I know how important it is to be able to engage a client, or to be able to engage a contractor really viscerally and deeply visually in your design intent. But now the point is, how are we going to get that, especially out to the field? How are we going to take that model data and begin to integrate it into some other formats? And how can we make it portable? How can we take the power of modeling and make it easy to bring with you? And how are we going to integrate it with some of the other technologies that are out there? So I'll show you this, which is one of the most amazing things I've seen recently. And hopefully you can see this over my hotel dial-up connection. But this is, in Monterrey, Mexico, a proposed high-speed rail line. And this has taken helicopter video with a model directly integrated right into it. Pretty incredible. I've seen a lot of modeling before, but that was one of the best examples I've ever seen in terms of integrating it right into helicopter video. Pretty powerful stuff. And then I don't know how many of you have seen natural light holography, but holography used to be pretty complicated in order to be able to actually visualize it. But now you can take a model and you can print it onto a flat piece of plastic. And you could carry that, on an airplane and go to a meeting. And you plop it down on a table, and nobody needs goggles or glasses or anything special. You hit it with a halogen light from above, and the model, whatever it is you got in the model, pops right up off that piece of plastic in pretty high detail, and you can see it right there in the room. But as you can see, this guy's turning it. It's just a flat piece of plastic. So a very compelling way, to, again, make your model really portable and make it so that a number of people can engage with it without having to all crowd around a screen and look at it in a two-dimensional way in order to see three dimensions. Here you've actually got three dimensions that are portable. And as with anything, the cost will come down the more that people use it. Then there's lots of interesting stuff going on with augmented reality, integrating it with GPS. I like this example from DPR out in California. What they do a lot of healthcare work. And one of the things that they'll do before they put the rock up, because they self-perform all their interior construction, so they've got it all studded up and they've got the mechanicals in there. They're actually walking around looking at, all right, what medical equipment is going to be in this space? And so that little camera connected to GPS actually locates where you are, and the model then displays to you exactly what's coming up from the model. So you're integrating model data with that live camera feed right on your camera there, on the laptop there, as you're walking in a space, and you actually see what's supposed to be here, so I can make sure the mechanicals are there and stubbed out correctly, before I rock the space. Very practical uses. And then the same thing in terms of now, what's the facilities manager going to be able to do coming in 3 years later to be able to see what's up above that ceiling, but once you've captured that in a model, and again, you can coordinate it through GPS to know exactly where the camera in your iPad or your laptop or whatever, your portable device is pointed, basically to show you what you're looking at with X-ray vision. Pretty cool stuff. And then there's just going to be amazing hardware things that happen to get into either just amazingly immersive environments or, what we're seeing with Google Glasses and being able to really bring all kinds of information right into your existing world. So there's going to be very exciting things that continue to happen both on the hardware and software side. And it's going to be driven a lot by practical applications. And then lastly, I want to talk a little bit about a big trend that I think we're going to possibly be the most transformative trend in our industry over the next 20 years, is what we call the industrialization of design and construction. You're beginning to see things like prefab. And, we're very excited when we can prefab a corridor rack in a hospital, right, and bring it to the site. That's great. But the next logical step, of course, is just to be able to order that out of a catalog. There's no reason to design it from scratch, have it made by trade contractors one at a time, custom built. And yes, we're getting some efficiency by prefabbing it and not cutting up raw materials on a site, but the next logical place to go is, there's only a few versions of that you would really need to be able to satisfy 80% of the needs out there. Somebody's going to start making those. And somebody's going to start making combinations of slabs and structure. Somebody's going to start making combinations of systems and structure. And you'll be able to just specify out of a catalog and virtually assemble bigger and bigger and bigger chunks of things. And they'll just be brought to the site and assembled. And that's pretty much the way that they've gone with shipbuilding, and they've gone with aerospace, and they've gone with all the major manufacturing, capital asset manufacturing businesses have gone that way. And so all we really have to do is follow in those footsteps, and you're beginning to see the early signs of it now, and I'll share with you some of the things that we're seeing. There's a great example here from a mechanical contractor out in the Chicago area that I think a lot of called Hill. they were faced with a real challenge. They had to build a 60 by 60 chiller plant. Normally, they would like to have access to the site, and they'd like to have 3 months to build it on site. Well, unfortunately, due to the nature of this particular project, they were only going to have access to that part of the site for 3 weeks. That was it. And so what they did is they built the entire thing off-site. This is that same chiller plant without the skin on it, in their shop, tested it, and knew that it worked, and were able to put it together on that site. And they did it by breaking it down into these modules. Now this modular design, of course, could easily be manufactured, and it might be Hill, it might be Train, who knows? This is a big business opportunity, but this is definitely the way we are going to go, is that you'll be able to order these things. I mean, look at this, the parting lines between these modules and the finished model here. You can see these things could really just be cranked out of a factory and be had in a matter of weeks. So this is the view of them actually building this in their factory, in their shop, pressure testing it in advance. And I'm hoping you can see that okay. Because this is one of the most amazing prefab things I've ever seen. A 60 by 60 foot chiller plant completely built in a shop, operated and tested, and then broken down into parts and moved out onto trucks and installed. And they were able to get into the site and get it all up and operating in 3 weeks. But again, think about this as a business opportunity. There's no reason these things can't be manufactured by somebody and be delivered quickly. So we're not actually custom designing these things and custom building them anymore. I think that's pretty much where the industry is going to be going pretty soon. I'll give you another example. In Mexico, there's a company called ICA, and they're very well known for self-performing precast. But now they've gone into the correctional facilities market, and they actually built a factory. And they have a series of modules that you can virtually design. You can see here on the left, these things can be configured for endless numbers of actually very interesting designs. So you're not constrained in any way in terms of what your design is. On the right here is one of the actual completed facilities, and here's a model, part of which you'll see here in a video in a second. But they can, at this point, from this library of modular designs, they can produce 50 cells a day out of this factory. So they're pretty much completely reinventing the correctional facilities industry. Here you see you put down the precast frame, and then out of that library of modular elements, their factory can make whichever ones are needed, and they're just brought to the site and assembled. So they're taking about 30% out of the time of actually putting one of these things in place. And they're getting a lot of success in the Mexican market, and they have a partner here in the United States that's going to go bring them into the U.S. market. So this is going to really fundamentally and dramatically change that, and this is their factory. They have a purpose-built factory specifically with these computer-controlled molds where they do research into materials and into textures and colors and fabrication technologies, and they can bang out 50 cells a day out of this thing. It's pretty incredible. And they're also doing the same thing now with housing, which there is a great need for all over the world to be able to do really good quality housing and take advantage of this what I call mass customization, where you have computer configurable molds that can turn out 1 or 50 of something. It's indifferent to them. They just pour the concrete in it, and they're molded up, and they go. So it's again, this is going to fundamentally change a lot of things. And then lastly, I want to point you to a company out in the Bay Area called Aditas. A friend of mine was with Anshin and Allen, and he left there. He was a great healthcare designer, and he hooked up with some folks from the silicon chip industry. And in the silicon chip industry, they've already pretty far advanced in terms of taking one basic design and being able to configure it for all kinds of different uses in manufacturing. So essentially they're taking that very small scale idea and they're putting it to the full scale of being able to do hospitals off of a pre-engineered kit of parts. This is an example of a project that they did for Kaiser Permanente, which won an award from them last year. The idea is they start with operational modeling, and it's all calculated for operational optimization. See, in this case, if your goal is that at a clinic, time to doctor is 10 minutes, what does that mean in terms of all the design layout? And so as opposed to starting with the design, they're basically starting with operational criteria, and that is calculated to drive the design solution. And they've got all these pre-engineered parts that they can produce in a factory. Their deck, they have the steel chassis they're working with, Connect Tech, which is another Bay Area company that has these fast connect seismic proof, not proof, but able to withstand a certain level of seismic activity. And they can basically put an entire healthcare facility together out of this kit of parts, including all the interior partitions with mechanicals in the in-wall systems, and again, just bringing them to the site and assembling. So they're really shifting from lots of raw materials at the site, things being constructed, or even the idea of customizing a design and having it prefabbed into constructing entire facilities out of this pre-engineered kit of parts. And the beautiful thing about a slab like this that's made in a factory, as opposed to that 1-inch tolerance across 10 feet that you tend to get with field-built slabs, which make it really difficult then to use any kind of prefabbed wall systems on top of it. Everything's done with factory tolerances when it's brought to the site. And you can see here, this is that design that they won the award with from Kaiser, and what you see on top here is an example of some of those elements all put together in the space. So you're doing high quality, you're doing it much faster, and it's less expensive than traditional healthcare facilities. So these are three examples, I think, that are pointing the way towards where this whole industry is going. And modeling is really at the bottom of all of these things. Because we're dealing with things at the digital level, now we're able to actually implement at the digital level, much like happens in those other major capital asset industries that I talked about. So right now, we're also involved at McGraw Hill in looking at the whole issue of uncertainty in design and construction. We've got a major study going on right now that's funded by 4 organizations and 2 companies, trying to unravel what it is that brings uncertainty into our process and how that can be addressed. We're now also beginning a process of looking at what is the value of BIM from the owner's perspective, not only design and construction, but what's happening with the long-term use of that modeled asset in facilities management, operations, and maintenance. We have a third initiative that we're calling High Performance Construction, and we're doing our first event in March on that. We'll be doing an event in the fall in the East Coast. I hope to get most of you guys to come to that. But we're looking at what is it about, we've all seen high-performing buildings, but what about that process of getting that building put together? What is it about that we could call high performance, and what are the benchmarks, and what are the best practices, and how can we measure that, and how can we begin to score that, and how can we really bring some science to that process of high-performance construction? We're also looking, interestingly, at what the impact on students and teachers is in terms of their health in educational facilities, and how does design impact that? And then we're also looking at the impact of analysis and simulation on project outcomes. So we have a lot of interesting things going. And again, this is my email, and I welcome any of you guys contacting me at any time you want to with ideas or anything that you want to work on.